The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wedged between a calendar reminder and a grocery delivery notification. Family group chat. I almost ignored it. My family had always used that thread for logistical noise, birthdays, restaurant plans, photos of meals no one needed to see, nothing that required attention, nothing that carried weight. Until that day. "We've been discussing things," my brother wrote. A pause. Then my mother. "We think it's best if you no longer manage the accounts." My sister added the part meant to soften it. "It's not personal." I stared at the screen longer than necessary, reading the sentences the way you reread something in a foreign language, convinced meaning might change if you looked hard enough. Not personal. As if years of spreadsheets, late-night calls, and careful decisions had been some abstract hobby I'd casually picked up. As if responsibility could be removed like an app from a phone. I typed slowly. Understood. I considered adding something else, a question, maybe, a clarification. Instead, I pressed send. 2 words felt proportionate. The silence that followed stretched oddly. No emojis, no follow-up explanations. Just the digital equivalent of people avoiding eye contact across a room. What none of them acknowledged, perhaps what none of them fully saw, was that managing the accounts had never been a simple administrative task. It had been pattern recognition, risk containment, quiet intervention. My father had once described it half-jokingly as me being the cautious one. The phrase stuck because it was easier than explaining what actually happened behind the scenes. I didn't argue the decision. I simply stopped. No reminders about payment schedules. No monitoring of investment drift. No subtle corrections when enthusiasm began to outweigh arithmetic. The systems remained intact. The infrastructure didn't collapse, which, I suspect, reinforced their sense that the transition was harmless. For a while, nothing appeared different. Occasional messages floated through the chat. Banks being slow, markets are weird lately. Probably just temporary. I read them the way you read weather reports about cities you no longer live in. Mild curiosity. No compulsion to intervene. The first real shift didn't come from my family. It came from an unfamiliar number. "Hello," the voice said, measured and formal. "This is Daniel Harris." A name I recognized immediately, though we'd rarely spoken directly. "Their lawyer. There are developments we need to discuss." His tone carried the careful neutrality of someone trying not to sound alarmed while clearly being alarmed. I listened. Missed tax adjustments, penalties compounding, liquidity issues created by poorly timed withdrawals. A restructuring decision made without understanding its downstream effects. Nothing catastrophic in isolation. Together something else. "These matters," he continued, "were previously handled with consistency," a polite professional phrase for what he didn't want to state bluntly. "You need me to step back in," I said, a small exhale on the other end of the line. "Yes." Not accusation, not defensiveness, just recognition. When we met, the atmosphere was different from any prior financial conversation I'd had with my family. No casual confidence, no assumption that numbers would obediently align with intentions. Documents covered the table. Columns of figures, annotations, projected consequences. The quiet language of institutional reality. My brother avoided looking at me directly. My mother's posture carried unfamiliar tension. My sister's usual certainty had narrowed into something closer to fatigue. Daniel did most of the speaking. Technical explanations. Timelines, corrective possibilities. Then, finally, the part that shifted the room. "We need authorization," he said, turning toward me. Not suggestion, not preference. Need. The word settled heavily because everyone understood what it implied. Control had not disappeared when I sent those 2 words. It had simply been invisible. I didn't respond immediately. Not for effect. Because decisions involving consequences rarely benefit from speed. "What exactly?" I asked. "Are you asking me to assume responsibility for?" The discussion that followed was procedural, almost clinical. Roles, boundaries, limitations. No emotional reconciliations were offered. None requested. When the meeting ended, nothing resembled triumph. There was no satisfying reversal, no dramatic recognition scene. Only an altered understanding occupying the space where certainty used to live. Outside the office, my mother walked beside me. "You could have warned us. I considered that." "I did," I said. She frowned slightly. "You said understood." "Yes." A pause. "I understood." She didn't reply. Some shifts aren't loud. They simply remain, reshaping everything that follows without announcing themselves.